Hey everyone, welcome to the second podcast of Sharp Sharp with me, Rob Rose from Currency News and Zukile Majova from Scrolla. Please download this podcast if someone sent it to you. Download it from Spotify or Apple and let us know what you think. My email address is rob@currencynews.co.za and Zux is Zukile@Scrolla.Africa. Zux, it's fantastic to be here. We had some great feedback on last week's edition, so glad to be doing it again.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. I actually pushed it to friends. I didn't think people were going to see it the first time. Send it to friends, and everybody was like, "Geez, this could be something."
Friends are like,
yeah.
I'm so dumb actually, eh?
Well, you are talking to friends. They're being kind to you. Obviously, people complain a little bit about the sound quality, which we have.
We fixed it.
We have fixed it now. As you can hear, we sound really good. Yeah. Anyway, always a busy week, Rob. Always a busy week in South Africa. Always interesting. I saw the president was all over KZN. Well, I found that very interesting. And he commented about what's going on in Iran, how South Africa is trying to manage that situation. And interestingly, it looks like our goods are actually moving through the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, we're lucky because not everyone's is, but the country that is most impacted by this is the United States. I mean, this week, today we're sitting here recording this after Donald Trump has agreed to a 2-week ceasefire brokered by Pakistan on this, and this has meant that the markets have recovered. Oil prices fallen 16% today. Stocks have recovered, but what happened on Monday essentially was, on Tuesday, was that Donald Trump said that he was going to decimate an entire civilization. I mean, how brazen is it for somebody in a position of such power to be proudly flagging a war crime that they intend to commit?
Rob,
I mean, what does this say about the person?
I didn't sleep. I kept checking. I couldn't believe it. I'm thinking, here is a sitting president, one of the biggest democracies in the world, and is about to wipe out an entire civilization of people, including children. I'm thinking, good Lord, what kind of world are we going to wake up tomorrow to? And
you didn't think he would tackle. I mean, the famous thing about Donald is, Trump always chickens out. I mean, that's the taco trade, is that you expect him to. And this morning, when I woke up, I saw that he'd actually done this. He'd said, okay, we've agreed, and apparently an hour before his 8 p.m. deadline, that there would be the ceasefire. And so he did chicken out, and that's why markets recovered. I mean, do you think that this is going to be a longer-term recovery, or do you think in 2 weeks' time we're going to be in exactly the same position?
Funny enough, I told a colleague who was worrying about the price of oil going all the way to $200. I said, no. I think it's going to be stable under 100. It can even do better, Look, I still can't make up my mind about who benefits more from this ceasefire, But the Iranians are saying that they got a lot of what they wanted. They've got a 10-point plan. Let's see what comes out of that. Quite interestingly, though, where does South Africa stand?
Absolutely. I mean, I do think this is an important point, how you react now, because in 10 years' time or 15 years' time, I absolutely foresee a scenario in which Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu are facing criminal charges globally for war crimes. That seems to be an inevitability given the fact that they have targeted civilian infrastructure in this case, and certainly Netanyahu has in Gaza and elsewhere. That seems an inevitability. So how you position your country at this particular point is important. Do you feel that South Africa has trod the line particularly well? Europe, for example, has stayed out of this Iran dispute to a large extent. I mean, what are your thoughts on South Africa? Have they kept it non-aligned in theory?
It's interesting when this whole thing, the genocide case against Israel, when it started, everybody kept asking, especially us political analysts, what's behind this? What is the thinking? Is it really human rights? Is it Iran funding the ANC? What on earth is going on? Look, if we had remained non-aligned, would really be clean. People would really take us seriously. But we are not exactly non-aligned. If you look at what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, we went there pretending to be non-aligned, and everybody knows we love Putin. I once said to a colleague that Putin is more popular in South Africa than the president of South Africa, and people didn't believe it. I can tell you now, black people love Vladimir Putin in this country.
Why is that?
It's a weird thing.
What lies beneath that? Because Putin himself he's a thug. I mean, he's more of a thug probably than Donald Trump or Netanyahu.
I think he's benefiting from this whole world order to see somebody from the East sort of standing against the West and all of that. The crimes committed by the West over many years, you can imagine, from a country that has been colonized, and there's not been real reparations for apartheid in South Africa, etc. You can almost understand. And I think he's riding that particular wave. To an extent, you see people in South Africa saying we need to move towards China, work closely with China, etc. But when you look at the Chinese record in terms of what they do for us, there is not much, and their commitment to Africa, there is not much. Basically, Africa seems to be a new market for their manufacturing sector. Improve their manufacturing order books. The whole continent now will be buying from China. But what do we get back?
Absolutely.
Not much. I mean, look at trying to fund the transition from coal to energy in South Africa. Most of the funding actually comes from the countries that you would want to hate. That is, if you are a pro-Putin person. Funded by the US, funded by the Europeans. How much funding is coming from China? Because look at China; they are actually moving a lot towards the new energy generation, renewables, etc. But they're not prepared to fund that in Africa.
Absolutely, and that's such a critical point, because the fact is that our sentiment of our government leaders, and specifically I would say the ANC, has been a sentimentality towards Russia and a sentimentality towards China, and against the US, which is seen as this big imperial force. But I think you're absolutely on the money when you say that the truth is that that's where we sell our produce. That's our biggest markets. You can't afford to alienate America. So the point is that's why you want to keep a non-aligned stance. But the truth is we haven't kept that. With Russia, for example, of all the UN resolutions on the Ukraine, 7 of them we abstained from. And the last one was the most obvious one. I mean, do you support a just and lasting peace in the Ukraine? And we abstained from that, which illustrates that we just didn't want to anger Russia, which is such a cowardly way to do things. And it shows that sentimentality rather than rationality is dominating our foreign policy.
Our situation is worse in Iran. Remember all the MTN shenanigans in Iran, the military cooperations with Iran. Our situation in Iran is worse. We can't go there and claim to be non-aligned. Everybody knows where we stand as far as Iran is concerned.
I mean, the US is a difficult thing because at the moment it's this creeping authoritarianism in the US that is difficult for us to handle, difficult for any society based on democracy and human rights to handle. The US uninvited us from the G7, which is fine. We're not actually a G7 country, so that's not too bad. But Donald Trump has gone out there and he's specifically sold this myth of a white genocide in this country, which is just fabricated. It's a complete lie. And this week we saw his administration, his deputy president in Hungary, basically touting for the right wing candidate there, which is surely not a great thing. I mean, should we be more antagonistic towards the US? We've just said, our bread is buttered in that side. But I mean, to what extent do you tread a line between not angering them and standing up for what you believe in?
Rob, I think there's a shift in global politics now, and I think you really need to stand with your friends if you're saying they are your friends, whoever you're doing business with, whoever is spending a lot of money in your country, the companies coming to your country, employing your people, making your economy stable in very complex times. People can move their money to different parts of the world, Rob, and to come out and almost bite the hand that feeds you, it's quite problematic. I'm not saying that you should be submissive, but AGOA is a real issue in South Africa. A lot of people are benefiting from that. A lot of industries are benefiting from that. We've got to seriously consider our relations with the US, like I said, and for me, that's where I stand on these issues.
I think it goes back to that fundamental point about foreign policy, which is that you don't really have friends. You shouldn't have friends. You have interests, and I think that should underpin your non-aligned status. But we've compromised that by acting in a way that demonstrates hypocrisy. So we need to go back as South Africa, as a small emerging economy, and truly be non-aligned on these issues, right?
Exactly. I think we've been spoiled over many years. People give us without expectations. America, to an extent, is correct to say that if we are funding you, these are the expectations that we want. Look at our position, for instance, on just on de-dollarization, on the BRICS. It's no longer a secret now that there is an agenda within the BRICS group. It's no longer just emerging economies, etc., that you can invest in.
Just a bunch of mates hanging around on a Saturday.
It's starting to look different. With the additional members that you have now, even the whole human rights record now, it starts to become a problem. And that's where you would expect that South Africa would stand up if it was genuine. It doesn't seem genuine.
To move on to something slightly different, I mean, obviously we have the economic interests we're talking about now, and we can only do so much with our foreign policy. But we also have the issue of our GNU, our unity government, our grand coalition, and how that stays together. We can only, hope that it stays together. And you wrote a fascinating column this week about the kind of I suppose, the threat from within to the GNU. So we can get our foreign policy right, we can become non-aligned, but essentially this GNU we have might still collapse very soon because of what you call the ANC rebels within it who want the GNU to collapse. Could you perhaps elaborate on that slightly, your column that you wrote and where this threat comes from? Because it's existential for many South Africans.
Rob, there have always been ANC rebels. The group that used to be called the Radical Economic Transformation Group, which was aligned to Jacob Zuma.
And Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma.
Exactly.
Panyaza Lesufi would certainly be.
Cyril Ramaphosa did very well. It's very difficult from outside to actually say Cyril Ramaphosa has actually done well, but when you look at it, he's done well. He got that group out of the ANC. Those guys could have stayed in the ANC and let him do his 2 terms and implode the ANC from within and take it over again. That's what they could have done. But now they are gone, frustrated them out, especially to push Jacob Zuma out. That was a major thing, But it's starting to look like there are some remnants of it that are left behind, and spreading across provinces. Last week we were supposed to have a conference in the ANC that was stopped. You've got the pro-Ramaphosa group, Mabuyane wanting a 3rd term in the ANC.
Mabuyane in the East
Yes.
Cape, right?
And then you've got another group which is opposed to that. And again, that faction is likely to go against any faction that is against Ramaphosa. In KZN, you've got Zweli Mkhize, the former Minister of Health, who was doing very well until he was implicated in the digital vibe scandal. I actually liked the guy, and became very disappointed. So he's leading a huge faction in KZN, and others obviously will back him. We saw at the last conference, he challenged Ramaphosa, and he came very, very close. So now with Ramaphosa not taking part in this conference, one would assume he would become the main candidate against Paul Mashatile and Patrice Motsepe. But that becomes a 3-way horse race. I would think that Mkhize and Paul Mashatile will align and form an alliance against a Ramaphosa candidate. Now, on the subject of rebels, if you look in Gauteng, which is really what matters, the so-called Alex Mafia boys, they've been around now for about close to two decades. And their biggest guy now, Paul Mashatile, the deputy president, has a real chance at becoming president. And the blue-eyed boy, Panyaza Lesufi, is premier of Gauteng. And you can see as he's moving the chairs, he's bringing more of the Alex Mafia. The Maile brothers now used to be finance. MEC Maile has been moved to education. And there's a lot of ground in education because now it's education, sports, and arts and culture. It's quite a huge portfolio. And you can imagine the funding that is involved there. You can see that the rebels are really preparing for conference next year.
It's fascinating because, the perception was that the rebels, like you say, the Radical Economic Transformation Group that favoured tenders, that favoured or was more conducive towards corruption, was centred in the MK party, which left with Jacob Zuma.
And you are forgetting Ace Magashule, who was secretary, also very powerful. He's been charged now in Bloemfontein. For the asbestos roof tender, 250 million rand involved in it. But Gauteng is not entirely clean as well.
The point is that that's how we saw it as this group, but it actually isn't that at all. It's this group within the ANC, like you say, the Mashatile group, the Panyaza Lesufi group, which could absolutely regain control of the ANC. And I think is that a risk that I think a lot of people don't realize the extent to which this can happen and reverse things back to 2017 and effectively make it that Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma's faction had won.
Absolutely, Rob. Even if you look at this new group that we are talking about now, and you actually analyze in terms of how clean are they. The Tembisa Hospital scandal, it's a 2 billion rand scandal. It happened here in Gauteng. Same type of government, and you are not seeing a lot of people being disciplined or being dealt with or prosecuted for that. A lot of it is coming out of the Madlanga Commission. That tells you a lot of that's happening there in the commission actually was allowed to happen in Gauteng. I wouldn't say the current guys are actually any different from the Zuma, or was it called the Zuptas at the time?
The Zuptas. So the consequence of this is, you have this faction would prefer to have the EFF, Julius Malema's EFF, and Jacob Zuma's MK party in the GNU rather than the Democratic Alliance. This kind of thing happens, that faction takes control of the ANC, and after the next election you have a potential scenario where the DA leaves the GNU entirely. Is that likely? And what happens to the Rand? What happens to our economy then? We're getting back on the right track to some extent. I fear that if that kind of scenario happens, we're back in the economic dark ages again.
Absolutely, Rob. You have a situation in South Africa which I think some investors that would have had a tolerance, and all that hope that South Africans will get it back again. If we derail again now, it's going to be difficult for any investor to say South Africa is going to get back on the right track. Because remember, the ANC group that wins for another 10 years. The first term, it's guaranteed. It goes to the second term. So we're looking at 10 years of state capture 2.0. You don't want that. What you want is another 10 years of the GNU. Because look, things have... Ramaphosa was saying we are turning the corner. We actually are turning the corner. It's quite difficult, but we are turning the corner. If you give it another 10 years, and hopefully have a GPU, Government of Provincial Unity in Gauteng, hold the one in KZN being stable as well. KZN is very busy. They've turned around eThekwini. Mayor Cyril Kaba was brought in, and a lot of money came from the presidential fund to actually turn around eThekwini. That town was gone. That town had been stripped to hell. People don't understand. Maybe it's because it's a faraway town. That town was actually gone. We're looking at Johannesburg now, and people won't tell you the truth. Joburg was on the brink. This town was being stolen, totally hijacked. Or one can...
Joburg not still on the brink. I have a sense that it's... Look, I live here. I feel it's on the brink.
The talk is somewhat different now. Anyone who was interested in stealing $1 billion in Joburg now knows that all the eyes now are on Joburg.
So you can steal, 200 million?
You can get away with that, But if you're looking at what's going on in Durban now, you can actually see that the intervention from the presidency can actually give you good results very quickly. There is hope for Johannesburg.
Okay, so what is the scenario for the Ramaphosa candidate? Who is that? Is that just, only names I've heard about essentially are Patrice Motsepe, and who knows where someone like Fikile Mbalula would be in this? Who would be the best scenario for sort of the Ramaphosa economic centrist camp?
Yeah, I think if you look at the other side, they are working a lot. That is Paul Mashatil's side. They are working a lot with the names. In the Ramaphosa camp, they're working a lot with the idea. They're looking at somebody who's going to be pro-business, somebody who's going to sustain some of these interventions that they have made and actually improve the economy and improve investment and all of that. And increasingly, the name, it looks like it's going to be Patrice Motsepe. It's starting to become late for other names. Obviously, that camp has got a lot of names within it. But if those names don't start coming out now, it's gonna be quite late, and it's gonna be difficult for Patrice Motsepe to be able to say, "I'm pulling out of this thing," because the lobby group is on. They are ongoing. We saw T-shirts being printed. We're talking thousands of T-shirts, and those T-shirts have not been distributed yet. Largely because the ANC said, no, we can't have this situation. You've got elections. Immediately, if everything ANC now becomes about Patrice Motsepe, then we're going to have a problem with these elections. we are going to be watching the body language of Patrice Motsepe as the ANC campaigns in these elections, because local government elections and ANC volunteers and supporters are going to want to see where this man is that we are talking about. Obviously, they have seen him a number of times at NEC meetings, at ANC conferences. He is known to take some of the very expensive ANC tab, and people like him for that. But he has not been active. I don't think he can hide these coming elections.
Well, I mean, Patrice Motsepe has said so far that he isn't really in the running for it. But the point is that it's becoming a situation where he can't not do it at this point, like you say. But you don't want to preempt the local government elections, which have to happen first.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Look, if they do very well in the local government election, the Ramaphosa faction will actually take the credit for that. If they do very badly, then you're going to have a major problem. That conference of 2027 December could be very far if they do very badly.
Can we talk about another billionaire at the moment, away from Patrice Motsepe? Not that Patrice Motsepe isn't a very wealthy and influential person, certainly for the ANC, but we're talking about someone called Natie Kirsh, who was a massive deal in South Africa in the 1970s and 80s. He basically owned a whole chunk of the business sector. He owned 12% of all the consumer goods in South Africa went through his companies. Then he had a massive fight with Sanlam and basically quit the country. He went to go and start up this thing in America, and he sold it last week for $29.1 billion, which is essentially 500 billion rand. And that's a massive amount of money. It's equal to 7% of our GDP. And this guy goes, a South African guy goes and does this deal in America. And you kind of wonder, why would you not do that kind of deal here? Could you not do it because our environment doesn't support entrepreneurs? Or is it because America is just a much bigger canvas? And I think there are questions around both. I mean, America is a much bigger environment, but equally, perhaps we're not conducive towards fostering entrepreneurship like we should be.
Yeah, there's a lot that I found interesting about that story, Rob. I'll tell you, we need to get to a point in South Africa where we create, even if you can't change the entire environment to be pro-business, but there are some sectors where we are very powerful, where we should actually allow the entrepreneurs in those sectors, give them all the maximum support, even to the point of relaxing some of the BEE codes and regulations. For instance, in agriculture, for instance, in mining, we say we're strong in mining. The financial services sector is becoming very strong in South Africa. So you can imagine a foreigner coming through to compete with outsurance. We're talking billions and billions of rands there, and 30% of their investment has to go to Black economic empowerment. It's a complex subject, Rob.
It's complex. I mean, Black empowerment, you've seen, it's all in the news at the moment, and provoked to some extent by the Trump administration. But there's been a huge fight against Black empowerment, saying that despite the noble goals of it, essentially it hasn't produced what it wanted to do. And it goes back to the beginning, the conceptualization of Black empowerment. I spoke to Natie Kirsh, the president's brother, who said that the idea at the beginning was to not have a situation where you divide up existing companies and say you take this from an existing company, but to incentivize entrepreneurship, incentivize new companies. But they didn't do that. The government chose to go with Black empowerment in this current thing, and it just hasn't worked, has it? I mean, is that a massive disincentive for entrepreneurs?
There's no question about it, Rob. It hasn't worked. Increasingly, this used to be a subject that could be dismissed as a white community complaining about this and that, but now you are starting to hearing a lot of Black voices and saying this thing is not working. It's not working. So it's time to review. I'm happy that there are talks of reviewing it. It's time to review it. Now on the issue of the cash deal, it's quite. Could it have worked in South Africa? No. I think South African business people, especially the entrepreneurs, having managed to work through all of these red tapes and difficulties in South Africa, when they go elsewhere, where the market is open and you can be whatever you wish to be, the so-called American dream, they actually are going to fly in those particular environments. Like I'm saying, that we need to create pockets of some changes, especially even if you look in the ICT sector, for instance, the growth of AI. We are not talking about the regulation of podcast, the Mark G podcast and all of that. and now it's a whole government thing that's been brought into it. That particular environment starts to become scary. You don't want that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't want that.
Sense, the theory is from lots of business people I speak to. They said this government hasn't met a regulation it doesn't like, and hasn't seen an industry it doesn't want to regulate. And that's a bit of a problem when you want to create something. Essentially, if you let people fly, you will create jobs, you will hire people, you'll deal with the jobs crisis, but you're not going to regulate your way to creating more jobs. That never happens. I think even Ramaphosa said before, it's not government that creates jobs, it's the private sector, so you've got to let them loose. And like you say, Natie Kirsh, one of the country's best entrepreneurs, created this massive business, and he's made a huge amount of money from it. And that shows you that we can succeed fantastically well on the global stage, but you need to be in a situation where you can do it, right?
The other question that people keep asking is, are there such opportunities in South Africa for new entrepreneurs to really come in and actually make a lot of money? Trust me, there are lots of those opportunities, even with the lack of infrastructure and all of that.
There's renewable energy, that's a massive one.
There is a lot of opportunities, Rob. I was looking at the new economy that's coming through from Uber, Bolt, and food delivery services, etc. And I'm thinking, in Mount Frey, where I come from, your delivery, since post office is now totally gone, your deliveries will come to Kokstad. It's 45 minutes away from my town, or they'll go to Mthatha. There has to be a last mile guy who takes those deliveries to Mvuzi village, where I am. That's a huge opportunity.
Yeah,
guys
sure.
on motorcycles just doing that, taking stuff from DHL's office in town and actually bringing it to you know what I'm saying? That's right across the country. Somebody can do that. It's a huge business. The opportunities are there, Rob.
And there's opportunity in decay. I mean, we could have basically swimming agencies setting up for potholes like Helen Zillisham does. We could have that happening the whole time.
Well, I've got a pothole down the road here in Hyde Park. It's just unbelievable. It's been there for now 3 weeks. I cannot believe it.
Guys, well, I think that's all we have time for today. I hope we've given you a strategy on how to handle Donald Trump's tacoing on Iran, and raised the flag over the threat to the GNU from the rebel group inside the ANC. We want to provide people with greater intelligence and skills to navigate South Africa's political climate, I suppose. I wouldn't say crisis just yet. So read Scrolla, read Currency, and join us next week. Tell us what we're doing well, tell us what we need to do better, and see you next week.
What a week, Rob. What a week, Rob.